Hi everybody. My name is Chilizi Unachuku. Manage emerging technologies at MTN, and I have with me Ayodele Olabi. Ayo, yeah, you can introduce yourself, I guess.
Yeah, hello everyone. I'm a machine learning expert. I work with MTN Nigeria, basically in customer analytics.
Yeah. Okay. So this is all the slide that I have, right? What we'll be doing is talking through real life scenarios of what happened, how we have been able to tackle the COVID-19 challenges using emerging technologies, right? So to start off, let me go into a bit of details about MTN and how it affected us, like the shifts that happened during the COVID-19 era, right? So the COVID-19 is not something any organization planned for, right? It hit everybody by storm. There were job losses. There were issues with managing customers. There were a lot of issues coming from different angles, right? And one notable one for us that we experienced that was basically like an eye opener was the shift for us from enterprise, the shift of focus, right, from enterprise businesses to consumer. So there was a lot of explosion in the regular consumer goods, right? So this consumer growth prompted a lot of because a lot of people now were now using their devices, unlike before that we were all working from the offices. So the enterprise usually has these packages that covers everybody and all that. But now we are now moving to the consumer bit of it, where there is a lot of data now being generated because a lot of people are now using their devices, right? For so many reasons. All your programming, machine learning algorithms and everything, the MLs, we are all running it from home. You are not using the company's infrastructure anymore. So you needed a lot of data. And due to that too, user experience was hit because and user experience was hit, and then people started giving more feedback to the network. So from that, we were able to gather like a lot of insights, right? So with all these insights, and the interesting thing for us was like we started. Our saving grace for MTN was that we had started like a very big data project prior to the whole COVID-19. So we had this our data warehouse infrastructure that we had created. But because of this, we had to quicken steps to improve on it and increase the number of data points. So I'll be talking about how we have been able to utilize not just these data points, but our existing data and our infrastructure that we've always had. Importantly, what would I say, our base stations and code that we have always had, and how we have been able to utilize it in fighting the various challenges that arose from it. Right. So first thing first, let me. I don't know, Ayo, do you have anything to say? Or should I just jump into
Yes, I think you've said it all because it was just like an eye opener for us to really evolve into things that we're already preparing for, and that was the advantage for us because we've already had these steps already in the funnel, and it was just pushing them live, and it was a very interesting period here because even employees could work from home and get things done at that point, still connected to that strong data warehouse and strong data that we're able to.
yeah. Okay, great. So one of the so I'll be going through several different emerging technologies and how we have been able to apply them in solving certain issues. So let me start off with geofencing, geospatial data gathering, and how we used it during the COVID era, right? So during the COVID era, there were a lot of challenges with contact tracing, and there were a lot of challenges with with contact tracing and detecting this high risk area and all that. So I remember back then we were still we didn't have that kind of data. Like the industries didn't have the kind of data to be able to get this thing done. But we had data where we could leverage on, right? So we have our base stations, and our base stations automatically acted as geofences that we could use. So we can tell, we were able to tell, we were able to tell using this geofence to tell where people are migrating to at that point, particular point, because a lot of people were now going to be working from home, and the what's it called, the stay-at-home order was given, and then people had to start migrating to their different areas, the different homes and locations where they work from. And yeah, so because of that, we now had to start thinking, like, how are we going to be how can we tell which areas are going to be needing more medical facilities in the future? How are we going to control the spread of the virus? Like our own contribution into this. Right? So we were able to utilize these base stations that we already had in conjunction with some of the data that we had in our warehouses to be able to say, okay, this amount of people are migrating to this particular area in the states or in the country, and we need to be able to make sure that there is no spread of these viruses in these particular areas, right? So that's where you start looking into how to provide services and amenities on standby in case there's an emergency breakout in those areas. So you will always find that there's a lot of concentration of people on the island, because that's mostly where the jobs are. And a lot of people migrate from the mainland to the island to work, but now you see a lot of people working from home, and you now start looking at these clusters of areas. So you have to start monitoring, like, the market areas, like where you have concentration of people, how to make sure that in case there is a breakout there, So this geofencing was important to tell that this particular person has crossed into this particular, or this group of people are in this particular area utilizing this base station. So we report back to our network to enrich that data platform that we had created.
Yeah. Yeah.
So so then again it was
sorry, let me just add to that, because it's that was a very interesting project which we did together, because the importance of mobility was really a huge cause of concern, especially to understand susceptibility areas and area of high infection, because that at that point you can be able to define the worst case and best case scenario, because invariably even COVID-19 definitely will really add his own effects in terms of customer movement and customer revenue, as well as dense places. Then, for example, we were able to geofence based on areas where we seemingly supposed to be having remote densities, and where those areas often at some point started having huge densities, based on the fact that people are seemingly trying to move to places of lower density in terms of protection, the isolation, and trying to keep themselves safe. One of the interesting thing about that type of data is because it's a geospatial data, you can get you can get geo coordinates and map them together. And at that point, you can be able to understand if someone in that geo coordinates is infected, and you can be able to predict the susceptibility rate at which others could be infected. In terms of movement, you can be able to determine that, okay, this is the migration rate between these areas. So you'll be able to understand areas of high dense migration. What I mean dense migration is that where you have a lot of people moving and migrating to. At that point, you can be able to quickly effect policies to mitigate the risk involved in that place. Because you definitely know that people migrate a lot in one area. Definitely should give you a huge concern now, okay, what is exactly happening in this area? It also helped a lot in terms of resource allocation, because at that point, when you understand dense areas and in terms of places of high population density, you can begin to do that allocation, resource economic value proposition around those places of high density. And in terms of government laws and all the enforcement, you can be able to, okay, take for example, if you have a place of like 30 people, you shouldn't be allocating the same level of resources to a place of 1,000 people. During this period, for people that write library, GeoPandas was one of the interesting libraries that was very, very abused at that point because you had to read geo coordinates and trying to put it inside a place that you can easily manipulate the data as well as possible.
All right, thanks, Ayo. So another thing I wanted to even highlight was how, but the next one of the things I'm going to be highlighting now is how we were able to improve on customer experience. I mean, it's still an ongoing process. We are always looking for ways to improve the experience of the customers and on the network, right? But then one thing, like I had mentioned before, a lot of people are now providing more feedback. More people are now using most of our digital channels, right? And so for us, it was overwhelming at some to say the least, because a lot of people weren't giving as much feedback as before until they now had to sit at home and use our services to get their jobs done. So this is where we now started applying deep learning to get insights, to get more insight into this customer data and how they are making use of our network, right? So we could easily tell the kinds of services that people will be using at a particular time, and how to allocate resources for this particular service, how to make sure that the network quality is always really good at certain points. And because of that, because of the explosion of the feedback we were getting, we now got into like this brainstorming session where we start thinking of how are we going to be handling these feedbacks, and also be able to categorize these feedbacks in such a way that we are able to create features or improve on the current existing features on these digital channels to make sure that customers aren't always experiencing these issues that they are always reporting, right? And one of those ways that one of the things we employed, or for example, is a chatbot, right? So we decided to create a chatbot to handle some queries, because there are some needs that really can be addressed using chatbot system that we have developed in house. And these chatbot systems can actually handle such queries from the customer with using so and another challenge was because of the increase in the amount of requests for data services, right? And people were asking for internet boxes. People wanted there were people who basically wanted like specialized bundles and all that. So we started looking at ways to improve the SIM swapping processes for people who want, because a lot of people now started moving to their lines from 3G to 4G. How do we improve the experience for SIM swap and all that? So we started looking into all these things using customer using these data, this feedback that we've gotten from customer, because we could categorize and know that these are what customers are looking out for the most. I mean, there are times you just sit on your own and say, oh, how do we improve on our services? You come up with one or two solutions. It's usually a hit or miss. But when you listen to the customer, when you listen to what the customer is actually saying, and not just the noise from the data, right? So actually going to that noise and listening to the customers, using these solutions that we have like using services like machine learning and co. You can hear the customer properly and say, okay, using with what we hear the customer say and with how it's affecting our network, we can now build these kinds of services to be able to address these issues that the customers are actually facing, right? So with speaking to how we are addressing customer experience, also there is also the community, the MTN community, we have been developing, and it's soon go live anyway. So the community basically is because you have a lot of people who use our service, who are like pros in using MTN's services, right? Because we are at that stage where we're transforming from just a telecommunication business to a fully digital business, where we have our arms across several different digital solutions and trying to meet the needs of people, right? Because there is a shift that is happening, and we're shifting from, and business, telecoms business basically is not only about calling someone anymore. It's not only about voice anymore. It's also being able to There is IoT, is also being able to
Connect people.
connect several different devices and people in so many different ways, not just pick up the phone, dial a number, you get. So, so how do we spread our tentacles is actually quite important, and so we have to create a community. We have to be able to mine more data to reach customers, right? One scenario I'll point out about us about how we were able to utilize this data to know what to provide to customers was during the COVID, the initial lockdown announcements when we gave out free SMSs. So we had the data to know that giving out SMSs are going to be more fruitful, more useful to people than just giving out free data and all that. Although we had different ways of actually providing this free data because we understood our customers and we know how many customers with the kinds of phones, the devices that we have a saturation of on our network, right? So we're able to utilize this data to actually decide that say, okay, this is something that we can give to customers and that will be very beneficial to a wider range or to a wider segment of our customers. Another thing we were able to do was to say a lot of people are going to be accessing educational sites. A lot of people are going to be accessing tools for communication and all that. So we look for ways to zero rate these different services, medical services, health services, educational services. So we were able to we zero rated these services, and especially those that we knew that people actually used a lot. And these are sample cases of using the data that we already had and to be able to provide to benefit our customers, right?
Yeah, I think Chile, I think let me just drop in here because you mentioned a very interesting point, and that's for me is actually one of my core area, which is natural language processing. For people that do natural language processing, you understand that when you're doing sentiment analysis, you can either sentiment on syntactic letters and semantic methods. When I talk about syntactic, I'm talking about the word ordering, the vocabulary, but when I'm talking about the semantic, we are talking about the meaning of the word. And for a language like Pidgin or English, you understand that for you to do semantic across that language, you really need to understand base words that define and the parameters, what they call it, the meaning of those words. So for when building chatbot system, it was quite interesting because you need to understand what the customer itself is saying across those languages. As you really need to understand the meaning and the context of those words, so you can properly make a good decision about okay, what exactly is the chatbot responding? Is it a negative comment? Because sometimes some people can be very funny on social media and they just give you a comment that really has no meaning and has nothing and that shouldn't have any response. But I think that during this post-COVID, understanding data in terms of natural language processing, text analytics, open the business eyes into understanding what exactly the customer wants to say, where exactly is saying the right thing, where exactly is saying the needs of the customer. So that chatbot system was a chatbot system that was developed based on the communication that is received from the customer in order to give the customer a bold digital new outlook and improve the customer experience of the customer and bring that digital feel to the customer. So the response is bespoke to you.
Oh, awesome. Okay, so let me quickly touch on the aspect of security. This is something that was on the rise during the COVID era, right? Because a lot of people were home, and a lot of people were home, and definitely a lot of people were also trying to not only get into network, not just the network, but to get hold of other people's data, right? Because now that everybody is at home, the hacking activities increased, right? You get a lot of people who are trying to get into the network, or um, trying to get some trying to get free data and all that. We see a lot of cases like that every year, but because of this COVID-19 era, there was an increase in such activities, right? Everybody was home, so I feel like everybody had the freedom to start even exploring, going online to see how they can to get other people's data and all that. So So what have we done in the area of security in trying to improve the lives of people and also the network, right? So for the network, one thing I can, something like what's or for the network and the customers generally, we basically went into um, using the service because we using the services of professional hackers in our from the community, right? So we had hackers who were already testing the network and making sure there was no loophole, looking out for um, service issues, USSD codes that could be exploited, and also services that we had which could be exploited, right? A lot of people are at home. You don't want to wake up one morning and you hear that your phone number has been hijacked by somebody else. So and so that's one of the steps we took, right? Using these hackers that we had in our community to make sure that they are providing us steady feedback, looking at what people are trying to do using the network, and they provide this steady feedback to us to tell us that look, that we detected something here and it could affect your customers in certain ways, or it could affect your network in certain ways. So we're always making sure that we covered our tracks in whatever it is that platform is, and you get. So using having these hackers were quite important at that point. But something really interesting that we started to do was also monitor user behavior, right? So we want to be able to know where are these exploits going to come from next, right? And without data, you can't really know where that exploit is going to come from next. So it's with data we started looking into. We started looking at looking at how will I put it now? Messages from Twitter, from places, from Twitter, from blogs that publish these loopholes from different community groups. So we started looking at those insights that are coming from there and started monitoring where the likely loophole is going to be from next, right? By monitoring people's behavior and knowing the people who these things are going to come from. So we started monitoring those behaviors of people to be able to detect something like that. And that's where AI is actually quite important. So we are able to even cover our tracks, not just by using actual hackers, but by using data to predict that something might actually be coming from the way this person is sending messages, that these particular exploits can be traced down to this particular group, or this exploit can be traced down to this particular person by monitoring how those exploits have originated in the past. You understand? So that's in the aspect of security and how we and what steps we took around those areas, especially as it concerns the network, because you always find people who are trying to get into MTN network, into our servers, to gain access to a customer's data and all that, right? And so we try to not only make it easy for customers to be able to utilize our services in this period, but to also make sure that the customers are actually secure. Now, so internally, okay, let me see the time. So I want to know how much time. Yeah, great. So internally, what we have been doing on our own, because usually when you sit in the office for a very long time, you start to think to yourself that you never think about it anyway. Basically, like okay, these areas of maybe sign-offs and all that. So those kinds of there are certain processes that you know that keep recurring, right? But nobody ever thinks about it. That what happens when everybody goes home, right? Especially in a big place like MTN, you want to be able to enable people to work from home in a large organization, like that, right? So you want to make sure that people are comfortable working from home, people have everything they need, all sign-offs and everything. So we immediately started making the most use of tools that we already had in-house, because we had these tools, but people usually preferred to maybe walk around to get things signed. People preferred to maybe call around to book calendars and all that. So, but we started encouraging the effective use of these tools that we already had in place. But not just that, not just making effective use of these tools. We had to start going into robotic process automation, right? We had to improve. We had to improve on these manual processes like almost immediately. So we started creating, we started auto, we had to start immediately automating a lot of these things that we never considered could be turned into workflows. So we started making them into workflows, improving on our various processes in the business to make sure that everybody can stay efficient while they're working from home. And that's one of the, and that's actually a major challenge. A lot of businesses that's wearing, because it took a lot of businesses by storm, right? And you'll be wondering, how are these people going to address certain issues like this? So that's one of the ways we're able to curb that issue. That's process automation, basically, to make sure that every manual process, or as much as possible, can be automated. And for those that haven't been, and for those that actually haven't been automated, that they will be automated eventually, and to make sure that everybody can comfortably work from wherever location, whatever location that they are in. Yeah, I don't know if you would like to say anything here.
Yeah, just to add to that, the beauty of Python itself as a language is because it has this usability across a various level of platforms. So, but as we are talking about all these things, just know in the back of your mind that Python was actually a key factor that made all these things obviously possible, because it serves as a language that you can integrate to as much as possible various areas in terms of these automations was essential, and it was key for us, and it's something that we should really as a community know that Python itself is a language that really makes things possible.
Yeah, especially since we run both Linux and both
Yeah,
Linux servers and Windows servers.
yeah.
So a lot of these things were a lot of these we needed something. We had to be able to run whatever application it is, whatever tool that we had created on any server, any system that we had, right? And we also have teams and all that. Tools like that to automate these processes can actually be built with Python, and just connected to Teams and connected to third-party services that we had, even SharePoint, right? So it's quite important. It was quite important that process automation was actually utilized in making sure that we could actually address working from home concerns as in the business in general.
Gentlemen, hi gentlemen,
Yeah.
can we start rounding up?
Sure. So
Fantastic.
just the last point. So then I round up, right? Yeah. So that's basically it. So but one other area that I want to let people know how they can connect to MTN and utilize all our data, is that we are opening up these platforms, right? So that's what MTN. That's why I had started with saying that MTN is going into becoming more of a digital services and not just a telco business. So we're opening up these platforms, these data services, identification, trying to know who is who, easing up KYC processes and all that. So we are opening up all these services at MTN using with the API services, API platforms that we are creating, right? So we have Chenosis, which is going to be like an African-wide one-stop shop for API services, and we also have Madapi, which is also in the works. So you'll be able to tap into MTN services using this API. You want to know your customer more, you want to be able to run sentiment analysis and all that. You can utilize these APIs that MTN are building, connecting back to our backend using our data warehouses to enrich whatever services you are building. So at this point, I would like to round up. Or yes, so at this point, I would like to say thank you to everybody for listening to our talks. Right, thank you for staying through our talks.